I'll be looking into Kevin Annett and his ties and affiliations, and as well, I will be talking about fake native groups and sold out natives and what their goals are and what they're supporting. I've already kind of covered that subject matter with the natives being sold out and the fake native groups in a couple different videos where I spoke about J.D. Anderson and the Asman and such. And I'll be leaving links for those in the descriptions. So feel free to comment and ask what you'd like. So it says that Kevin is a founding citizen of the Republic and one of its 3 national conveners. Okay. So a little bit about Kevin Annett. He was born in Edmonton in 1956, father of 2 children, and adopted by the Anishinaabe Indigenous Nation in Winnipeg 2004 and given the name Eagle's Strong Voice. He was educated at the University of BC, bachelor's degree in anthropology, master's degrees in political science and divinity. And he was ordained as a minister of the United Church of Canada in May 1990, held positions in Manitoba and downtown Toronto. He was hired as a minister of St. Andrew's United Church in Port Alberni in 1992, and he expanded his congregation from 10 members to nearly 100 by 1993. And it says he's fired without cause notice of review by United Church officials on January 23, 1995, after exposing this horrendous crime at his church's Alberni Indian Residential School and his church's theft of this particular native land. Kevin is subsequently expelled from ministry without due process, loses his wife and church in a church-funded divorce, and is smeared and blacklisted by a church RCMP Black Ops campaign that continues to the present. And we're going to talk about that a little bit because there are definitely some discrepancies there, especially with the RCMP. So Kevin convenes the first human rights tribunal into crimes in Canadian Indian residential schools. Vancouver, June 12th to 14th, 1998, co-hosted by this particular UN affiliate. I can't remember what the acronym stands for offhand. And based on the evidence revealed, the tribunal recommends to the UN that Canada and its churches be charged with this crime. And under Canadian pressure, the UN refuses to act, supposedly. So this particular article is on Murder by Decree, which is Kevin Annett's website, and I believe he has a book by the same title. So something here that I thought was interesting, especially considering it's on his website. It says he's been twice nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize and recently for the Order of Canada. This article is from August of 2021, by the way. Is conducting campaign tour under the auspices of Republic of Canada, a sovereign nation founded in 2015 and established lawfully at its first convention last July 1st to 4th in Vancouver. And once again, this article is from August of 2021. The Republic is the only movement in Canada to advocate and actively establish political independence from the British Crown and its puppet regime in Ottawa. Okay, so if it's trying to establish some sort of political independence from the British, why was he nominated for the Order of Canada? I ended up asking Kevin Annett when he was being interviewed on the show The Missing Link, hosted by Jesse Howe. I've been on that show before myself and spoke a little bit, but anyway, on Kevin Annett's episode, I ended up asking why he was awarded the Order of Canada, considering the particular views of Republic of Canada and what it is he is doing, because something like the Order of Canada is not as high of an honor as being knighted, but these kinds of honors, if you will, are honors to government and crown, but disservices to we the people. And so when I had asked about him being awarded the Order of Canada, he said he wasn't awarded it, he was nominated for it, and it doesn't mean he accepted it, and he didn't. And that was his manner of deflecting. He didn't adapt any further. But the real question then is, and I should have asked why he was nominated for it then, because that's a real question. Why would you be nominated for something if you supposedly want independence from the British Crown and as well from the puppet regime in Ottawa, the Canadian government? Why would you be awarded something like the Order of Canada, which, by the way, is given through the Governor General's office, and the Governor General is the Crown's representative on the federal level, and then you have lieutenant governors in each province, which is the Crown's representative on a provincial level. So, the Order of Canada is how our country honors people who make extraordinary contributions to the nation, but again, not to we the people. Since its creation in 1967, Canada's centennial year, more than 7,600 people from all sectors of society have been invested into the Order. The contributions of these trailblazers are varied, yet they have all enriched the lives of others and made a difference to this country. The grit and passion inspire us, teach us, and show us the way forward. They exemplify the Order's motto. I'm not going to try reading the Latin here, but they desire a better country. So, some of the federal partners here of the Governor General's office, well, the main one I'm going to talk about is the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. So, if the RCMP were running a smear campaign on Kevin Annett, yet he's nominated for the Order of Canada from the Governor General's office, and the RCMP work hand in hand, bread and butter, with the Governor General's office. How does that make any sense whatsoever? That's the real question there. So, a little bit about the office here in its history. The position of Governor General is considered the oldest public office in Canada. It dates back to colonial times when monarchs appointed governors to act as their intermediaries in state affairs. In 1608, Samuel de Champlain, a governor in all but name, fulfilled several duties and responsibilities that would later be carried out by the governors of New France, and after Confederation in 1867 by Governor General of Canada. So, yeah, again, that whole aspect of Kevin Annett is just very shady, just getting government or crown rewards, yet you want to separate from those very same organizations. So this is interesting. We see two birds here, and this is called the Alliance of Indigenous Nations. There is a document to download off of this website, which I'll be going over a little bit in the video. And I want to talk a little bit about it and show you a little bit about it and show what's supported on it, because it's definitely concerning to we the people. But a little bit here first, it says, as was also predicted by the prophecy of the eagle and the condor, that when the people from the four directions of the world would come together, they would begin the new earth. Interesting, because the medicine wheel has four corners there. The AIN Committee, that's the Alliance of Indigenous Nations Committee, has affiliated with many Indigenous nations over the last year and welcome many more to unite and treaty with us. So please contact us to view the results of our articles, understandings, and friendships. We welcome you and many more nations to join us in signing this treaty through the spirit and intent of oneness in purpose and our mission for the greater good, if you say so, because Indigenous is a term that is used in UNDRIP, that's the United Nations Declaration for the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and there's all these land, mineral, and resource rights and such granted to what is called Indigenous people in the document, but it does not define what Indigenous means, so that is of great concern. Considering a lot of these fake native groups that I've spoken about in previous videos, you generally purchase a pass, and then it says you're Indigenous or Métis or something to that avail, which, you know, I myself, for instance, am not native, so I can only imagine what going around saying that I am in those particular communities, what kind of trouble that would get me into. So, we feel we have embodied the essence together of our fundamental spiritual ways, customs, and beliefs. It may not speak specifically for all members, but it certainly carries the intent for all people. We also invite you to learn of our AIN Tribunal. AIN also likes to take notice of the Crown Corporation, United States Corporation, and the UN Corporation in the same light, spirit, and intent of all the AIN nations. So, there we go, siding with the United Nations, and the United States is nothing but a corporation just like Canada, and Canada is registered in Washington, D.C. through the U.S. Treasuries and Trades Commission. In closing, as our ancestors foretold, we are the ones we've been waiting for, to usher in peace, strength, truth, love, and freedom for all people in the world. Let's stand together as the new people to create the new earth, a better and spiritually enlightened future. We look forward to meeting you for our United Indigenous Day conference, a time of celebration in the near future. Miigwech, which means thank you in Anishinaabe. So, yeah, this is definitely something of great concern, and we can see as well the Aquarian age, or age of Aquarius, is something that's mentioned, and that can be interpreted in various ways. I gave a definition for it in my Sasha Stone video, but we can see that people who generally subscribe to the New Age type of philosophies and such would gravitate towards something like the Aquarian age. So, now moving forward, the Alliance of Indigenous Nations Treaty. So, once again, the Aquarian age is mentioned. We have entered the Aquarian age, an era of light, an age of awakening, and an age of returning in natural ways to spiritual ways. The indigenous nations are gathered as predicted to usher in this new golden age, an epoch that understands the message of heart, intuition, and nature to bring peace, freedom, truth, and love to earth, if you say so. And this was entered December 21st, 2022. And this is supposedly a treaty of peace relationship, nation building, national, international, and intercontinental trading relationship is made among the signing authorities of undersigned nations. Okay, so gotta do a little bit of scrolling, So some of the various things that are supported on here are things like the two-row wampum, which essentially there is a sort of piece of artwork that shows two boats on water, and essentially it's basically like saying we agree to trade our culture, resources, and such with the other boat, which would be the Europeans, and if not, you're welcome to stay in your boat. That's kind of my understanding of the two-row wampum. And then, as well, you have things that they support here like UNDRIP, which I have already discussed very briefly. And as we go through, you'll notice as well that they support things like NESARA and the Paris Agreement. Paris Agreement is just some climate change BS. And then NESARA is like, we'll say Hopium 101 if you subscribe to the Q movement type of a thing, where NESARA or JASARA is a return to a gold standard and a release of technologies that have been suppressed from the peoples and that kind of a thing. But a lot of people that preach about NESARA, JASARA also preach about something called the Great Awakening, if you will, and the difference between the Great Reset versus the Great Awakening is, so the Great Reset is, like a new world currency, new world religion, and, a fusion of countries, open borders, that kind of a thing. But the Great Awakening is supposed to be like a sort of, how do I put it, like the exact opposite. They're trying to play off of the Great Reset. So a Great Awakening is basically goes hand in hand with a lot of the things that I had just mentioned about NESARA, but the thing about it is that they talk about a quantum financial system, and what's this quantum financial system run on? The blockchain. Just like how every digital identity firm will always partner with something relating to the blockchain because it's basically an open ledger system, and they call it decentralized, but that's really just an illusion, especially when to access these things you're generally using a phone or other tap devices of sorts. So the following courts of law in this, or it says de jure courts of law, are the Ascot Tribunal, Supreme Court of the Chilcotin, Supreme Court of the Republic of Connaughton, and the First Law of the Land Tribunal, and the International Common Law Court of Justice. So you basically have the Ascot Tribunal as part of the ASMAN, and the International Common Law Court of Justice, Republic of Connaughton, that's all Kevin Annett. and then the Supreme Court of the Chilcotin. Basically, we're going to talk a little bit about the Chilcotin Nation in this, but the Chilcotin Nation in and of itself does not recognize what is listed here. But the thing about this, so before I even talk about the Chilcotin, let me hold my thought a sec. First, you have under the Asmin, otherwise known as the Anishinaabe, Salutri, and Métis Indigenous Nation, you have either Zane Bell or Chief Wabiska Mukwa, who's a member of the Knights of Malta, okay? And everything that I've ever researched, pretty much, I'm always able to track it through at the top of the food chain. You see either Jesuits or the Knights of Malta is what I've seen in my research. So now going to the Chilcotin state, we see the name Stanley Stump here printed, but no signature. And also what I just want to say is that this document likely has some names that are plastered onto it, such as Stanley Stump's, because Stanley Stump does not endorse Suzanne Holland, whose name is underneath the Republic of Canada, by the way. And as well, we can see that with the Republic of Canada, with Suzanne Holland's name, we're going to research her a little bit, but she is completely disavowed by the Chilcotin Nation and by Stanley Stump. So I think they just needed a placeholder name to put underneath the Chilcotin state, so they literally plastered Stanley Stump's name there, because for all intents and purposes, I don't know very much about the man, but he's apparently an elderly man who's been an activist for a period of time, and he doesn't subscribe to any of this Peoples of the Salmon, Asmin type of stuff, and sure as hell doesn't endorse Suzanne Holland. So you have Sabina DeVita's name here underneath the Knight of Malta crest over here, which also, like I said, Wabiska Mukwa of the Asmin Nation is part of the Knights of Malta as well. So I had mentioned Suzanne Holland's name, but you don't see her name plastered there, so I want to just show you her name listed here. So these are all the nations here, and then you see Chilcotin, Stanley Stump, and then underneath Republic of Canada you have Sue Holland's name listed, yet Kevin Annett is the guy who runs the Republic of Canada. So I just think that that's a little bit interesting. And as well, you know, it seems like they're trying to, for all intents and purposes, from reading this, and other people can by all means read this because I'll leave links in the description, it sounds like an independent sovereign nation is in the works. And actually I really shouldn't call it a sovereign nation at all, because they're very much in line with that of UNDRIP, and they talk about a de jure government, and de jure basically means legitimate or justified is what it essentially means in my research and understanding. But the reality is this is actually something that is totally de facto, very much like the Canadian government or the British. So a constitution should be ratified by the people, which it wasn't. So anyway, that's the contents of this document summed up to the best of my ability, and again, anybody can feel free to comment. And as well, sorry, actually I just want to show, this is called the One People's Federation Treaty. This is another one that's very similar to the previous document that I had just shown, although I haven't really analyzed it in total depth like I have the other one. But it says this was entered on December 21st, 2022, and they seem to be on board all of the same things: NESARA, Paris Agreement, UNDRIP, and so on and so forth. And we see the Asmin, Chilcotin State, Peoples of the Salmon, Whitefish Nation with Peter Cardinal, and the goals here as well are pretty well the same. This is just worded a little bit differently, but I just want to scroll to the part that shows the names. Okay, here. So Chilcotin, they've once again used Stanley Stump's name on the document. And then you see under Asmin, you know, Glenn Bogue, Wabiska Mukwa, and so on and so forth. And even here, under the Whitefish Nation, Peter Cardinal, like I just said, you have Papois Jeffries, and under Republic of Canada, now you see Kevin Annett's name on there, whereas in the other document, his name was not on it. So, now to move forward. So, here is where I am going. This is Suzanne Holland, a lovely picture of her. So, interestingly enough, she claims to be part of the Chilcotin Nation, like I was saying, but the Chilcotin Nation have disavowed her entirely, and she was placed under Republic of Canada, and they used Stanley Stump's name against his will. I'm not sure if Stanley Stump is aware of this, but I hope he is, and I hope he gets a copy of this video as well. So, as well, she claims to be the granddaughter of Leo Szilard, who's a physicist who knew Albert Einstein and worked on the Manhattan Project. So Leo Szilard, if people want to look him up, his last name is spelled Szilard. And in the first little bit, you can hear in the background just some laughing, and you can hear her disingenuously read some kind of script where she's fumbling over words, and again, sounds totally disingenuous. So, this is an article saying that she was linked to a bizarre U.S. kidnapping plot, and it says here that BC judges had called her a quote-unquote vexatious litigant. She tried to unsuccessfully sue the BC and federal governments, as well as the American Dental Association, over mercury fillings she received in 1982, and she lost a license to run her Williams Lake daycare in December 2014 after complaints were made. She calls herself Chief Justice of the Universal Supreme Court of the Chilcotin, and she issues quote-unquote orders and warrants. A BC Supreme Court judge pointed out in a 2015 ruling that her court orders have no relevance or validity, and she's not a member of the Chilcotin First Nation, which they have disavowed her organization, of course, like I said. So, now I'm going to move forward a little bit, and basically, I just want to say that oftentimes what happens is people get different labels who speak about things like Canada being a corporation and how basically the legal system has no official authority over us. It all just revolves around consent and that sort of a thing. And people often get labeled with things like sovereign citizen and free man on the land and stuff like that, which sovereign citizen is just a term that the FBI in particular actually used to label domestic terrorists. And this label is thrown out there basically depending on the terms that one uses or the facts that one points out. And this is the kind of work done by corporate think tanks in order to basically just narrow our minds so that certain things come to mind when somebody says something like there's a difference between legal and lawful. You must be a sovereign citizen. And so somebody who actually knows much more about the history of this corporation than I do, and as well knows a whole lot more about maritime law than I, is Johnny Hawk. Then he has this particular video, which I'll be leaving in the description, that I think you should watch because he goes over the history quite eloquently and in great detail. So once again, another article about Suzanne Holland. She's been found guilty of abducting a person under the age of 14, and this is her daycare. Basically, she was convicted of kidnapping. She was convicted in Williams Lake Supreme Court, and she represented herself through the lengthy trial, which saw her cross-examine Crown witnesses, including a police officer who led the investigation into the charge. This particular Supreme Court judge, Michael Tamman, presided over the trial. The charges stem from a 2014 investigation, and a publication ban prevents the publishing of any information that could identify the victim, which they're a minor, so of course. And she ran a daycare for a time in Lake City out of former Qualeen Elementary School in Williams Lake. And she is also claimed to be Minister of Children and Family with the Chilcotin National Congress, which I already went over that, how they actually disavowed her. So I think that about covers Suzanne Holland over here. And now I'm going to move forward and speak a little bit about some of the ties that she has and what she's affiliated with. But first, I just want to actually give this little description of the Chilcotin State. Chilcotin State is an independent country, state, and nation, and is located in the interior of British Columbia between the 50th and 53rd parallel. Grand Chief Stanley Stump Sr. declared the Chilcotin an independent country state in June 2016, and the Chilcotin National Congress is the government of the Chilcotin State. The Chilcotin National Congress was formed in 1980 by the Chilcotin hereditary chiefs. So this is called the Fly Your Native Sovereign Flags Rally from May 21st to 23rd, 2022. And the things that I noticed so far about this are, for one thing, what you can see here is this is Jonathan Holland, which is Suzanne Holland's son, and this particular guy, his name is Marius. He is part of Constitutional Conventions, which is Dallas Hill's organization. I've already spoken about Dallas Hills in previous video, and I'm not sure about Marius's current activities, so I'm not sure if he's still with Dallas Hills and the Constitutional Conventions or not. But basically, my experience dealing with Dallas Hills was that he calls everybody a parasite and calls everyone controlled opposition, and then eventually does videos and streams with those very same people, such as Serena Freedom Bear. And as well, he likes to distract, which I guess he thought that getting in contact with me, he could distract me by putting me on certain research projects, like looking into James Bowder, who he had known for over 10 years himself, so that would be a waste of my own time. And on top of that, his channel was basically, through Rumble, he was uploading my content, but he did not upload my Marcus Ray videos, which tells me something a little bit suspicious about Marcus Ray and possible involvement there with Dallas Hills. And as well, what I want to show you is at the start of this video, it shows some of the different flags here, which you can see the Republic of Canada, Peoples of the Salmon, and the Chilcotin State here. Or rather, I should say, the fake Chilcotin State ran through Suzanne Holland. So, now moving forward here, I am going to talk a little bit about Noam Chomsky. So, when Noam Chomsky says Canada's famously defrocked United Church minister Kevin Annett is more deserving of the Nobel Peace Prize than many who have received it in the past, you can take his word for it if you want, and if you like, you can believe Nobel Prize winner Mary Corrigan McGuire of the Belfast Peace People when she calls Annett a courageous and inspiring man. Okay, if you say so. So I'm going to look a little bit about Noam Chomsky because it's kind of interesting that he's suggesting Kevin Annett get a Nobel Peace Prize award. So, back when I was a young anti-war, anti-establishment activist, I used to hold the utmost respect and admiration for Professor Noam Chomsky of Massachusetts Institute of Technology. To me, he was a firm pillar and one of the brightest minds out there, ever wise, poised, articulate, and correct on many different issues, especially pertaining to the Israel-Palestine conflict. Many years later, and wiser, I find myself having substantial differences of opinion with this particular guy. For starters, there is much hypocrisy in his assertions and behavior now. For example, he seems to oppose the corporate oligarchy system until every 2 or 4 years when the elections arrive, during which he parrots the lesser evilism mantra ad nauseum. And yeah, if you're ever going to choose what you presume to be the lesser of two evils, that is a defeatist mentality, as I have learned, especially when I originally got involved in the freedom movement. I was volunteering for the PPC, and what do you know, Maxime Bernier is not all he's cracked up to be, and I have several videos about him which you can check out. And I've even questioned him myself, to which he's evaded me every time. What about the fact that Chomsky has managed to keep his employment with MIT all along, tenured and now emeritus? It is a known fact that MIT is one of the most closely related research universities affiliated with the military-industrial complex. If one is a true anti-war academic and what's more, a celebrity activist, could he ever really get tenured at such a college, especially at the height of the Vietnam War when Chomsky's career was taking off at MIT? Yeah, it sounds like an awfully convenient time for his career to take off too. So here's a few of his stances pointed out by the author of this article. He supports the existence of a belligerent Jewish state. He opposes the principles of the gradually supposed to be effective boycott, divisions, and sanctions movement, and he supported the no-fly zone and the subsequent utter destruction of Libya, a country that was the most prosperous African nation under the leadership of crazy yet brilliant Gaddafi, which, thanks to NATO, is now a failed state run by ISIS savage gangsters and Al-Qaeda terrorist thugs. Yeah, so as far as I'm concerned, I don't know very much about Gaddafi, but I'm pretty sure he tried to back up his nation in gold, or back up the nation's currency with gold. And of course, anybody who tries to either back their currency with gold or trades in something that's not the US dollar seems to get killed, just like Saddam Hussein when he was trading oil for gold. That definitely pissed off the Americans. Chomsky considers President Bashar al-Assad of Syria an autocrat and is somewhat comfortable with the continuous bombing of the great and resisting Syrian nation. The professor recently told Amy Goodman's Democracy Now! Program, Syria is a horrible catastrophe. The Assad regime is a moral disgrace. They're carrying out horrendous acts, the Russians with them. Democracy Now! Begins with the leading statement of worldwide outrage mounts over an alleged chemical weapons attack in a particular province, which was reportedly carried out by the Assad government. So this is interesting because there was never any sort of evidence to show that Bashar al-Assad was using chemical weapons on his own people. And villainizing the Russians really doesn't make sense because the Russians do have one of their vital military bases in or around Syria, to my knowledge. So it only makes sense that a country would want to protect their own assets. Chomsky supported the US-led coup in Ukraine and the illegitimate installment of this NATO-nurtured document in Ukraine. I'm not going to say this particular word, although the thing is those particular regimes were actually trained by the Canadian military under something called Operation Unifier. You can look up. Chomsky acknowledges the one-party corporate oligarchy, but then urges everyone to vote for the lesser of two evils like he did in 2008, 12, and 16, and just about every election before that. Let us keep in mind that any endorsement of lesser evilism is in essence an endorsement to maintain the status quo and hence a system of injustice that he claims to oppose. And I'm actually going to add that suggesting people vote is pretty much suggesting that they support the war machine to continue because people are selected, not elected, and you can generally always see royal ties of sorts within different world leaders. You can see that they're always related to important people in history, or they're part of different fraternities like the Masons and such, which is arguably, besides Jesuits and Knights of Malta, as well, the other thing that I find very common with people is that they happen to use the craft of Freemasonry, which is their secret handshakes and penalty signs and such. I always find these to be the most common things with people in positions of power or people that are providing disinformation to we the people, Masons, Jesuits, Knights of Malta. So it says here that Kevin is a agent provocateur, scamster, and a whole lot of other adjectives, and his International Common Law Court of Justice and International Tribunal for Crimes of Church and State and Republic of Canada is fake. His court officials are fiction, and his court orders are fake, unlawful, illegal, and null and void. And for one, George Duford does not exist. So I'm going to show you what they mean. So this is a name on this particular document here. The above image is a sample of fraudulent documents created by Kevin Annett. To believe these arrest warrants and public notices bear any legal weight is akin to believing in Santa Claus. And the truth is that there isn't a court in Brussels or anywhere else for that matter that bears the name ITCCS. In fact, Brussels as a country does not recognize common law jurisdiction. The court, called the International Common Law Court of Justice, was briefly a blog site owned and operated by Rainbow Warrior, aka Joshua Lemons, out of Hope, British Columbia. So Joshua Lemons, I've seen him in particular on Liberty, which is hosted by Odessa Orlowitz, who we know as an actress who's been in Freddy vs. Jason and a few other films with minor roles and such. So Joshua Lemons knows Kevin Annett. He has worked with him, and as well he is part of Peoples of the Salmon. And in this in particular, it's interesting because he's talking about the dangers of UNDRIP, and he spoke about that on Liberty as well. However, the reality is that Peoples of the Salmon and other organizations like the ASMAN are in full support of UNDRIP. So that's definitely quite concerning. And as well, for some reason, the image isn't loading here, but it's supposed to show Kevin Annett and Joshua Lemons together. So this is him on Liberty. And as well, so the last thing I want to point out here is I never saw J.D. Anderson's name on that document, but I know he's aligned with Peoples of the Salmon and the ASMAN, so I'm curious as to what his role is in what's going on here, because J.D. Anderson is a guy, you can watch my video on him, which I'll leave in the description, but he is a Freemason, and he is knighted as well, and he knows King Charles personally, as well as Beatrix of the Netherlands, I think. So it seems like a new nation and a de jure government is being formed based off that document. However, this is really just a step toward the New World Order is what it is. They're just bringing about a different system that is going to crush the Canadian system, if you will. But imagine moving from something tyrannical to a hell of a lot more tyrannical is basically what the goal is here. And with something like UNDRIP, imagine picking and choosing who is Indigenous or not. Basically, because like I said, that document doesn't even define what Indigenous means. So this is going to create a whole lot of problems, and I think it's just best to alert the public to these findings here. And if anybody has any questions, they can feel free to ask me, and I'll happily respond as soon as possible. And as well, I just want to say on a side note, being that we are talking about natives right here, this whole thing is all just a great example of bad medicine. So thanks everyone for watching. Take care of yourselves and continue spreading the good medicine.